So we are now live at a slightly reduced number, not quite what we were expecting, but hey, we are still prepared to carry on. And so we're a little bit later than planned, partly because I was having a little side joke about my curly whirly world with Mom. But here we are. It's just you and I today. So it wasn't quite what we expected. But hey, look, I mean, the whole essence of this episode, if you want to call it that, is what you choose now. And then, maybe that is the essence of the entire conversation.
It's a good starting point, like it's the perfect example of you can't control the circumstances, so what are we going to do?
Well, absolutely. And I think that's the whole thing, isn't it? And so therefore you can either go, oh, we're doomed, we're absolutely doomed, or okay, well, what do we do with that? Okay, so we had to have a little chat, hence why we're a little bit later than we planned. But actually, isn't that life?
Yes, that is life in its entirety. A couple of years ago, we stumbled across the birth plan my wife had written for when she was going into the midwife unit. So there was only a midwife unit; there was no doctors. And so it was going to be produced through this, the baby was going to be born through this unit. They play classical music and everyone will be rosy and sweet and fantastic. And so we had this beautiful birth plan, all the things she wanted in it, Of course, not a single thing went right. And even looking back at it, from the naivety of two non-parents writing this, and this, putting this together, it's quite a comical thing, but it's a perfect example of, you've no idea of the experience of what you're coming up, so you decide this is what it's going to be like, and therefore you define it what it's going to be like, and you get shown that no, that's not what it's going to be like at all. But then what do you do then? What do you do if it's not going to be like that,
And that's just it, isn't it? Because you suddenly go to this place, but that's what it was supposed to be like. I have this amazing diagram that a very dear friend drew for me, and at some point it was meant to be obviously the golden egg. That's what it is, the golden egg, isn't it? And it became a golden carrot. But we dream of what things are meant to look like, how it's meant to be, because we're told that that's how it's meant to be, and then it doesn't quite look like that. And then we go, oh my gosh, what happened? How did I arrive here? What does that mean? What did I do like this? I've gone to what did I do? And that's a story in itself, because I've gone to a place of what did I do to get that outcome, and I should do nothing. In those situations. And I suppose that's it, isn't it? It's like we've gone to that place, we've navigated, we've got to a place, and then suddenly we feel our choices have gone.
Yeah. But isn't it because we hold such expectations of situations, right? I see it from a couple of angles. One is we have expectations. We expect things to be a certain way. We expect things to be this way. We expect this to happen. We expect people to be like this. We expect people to treat us like this. All these expectations. And then we base our expectations on what's supposed to happen. And we're going to choose that I will be happy because these things have happened. Perfect. That's what makes me happy. And that was what will keep me happy from an expectations perspective. And then it goes the other way, where we are not choosing, where we are out of control of what's happening. We don't have control of what we can do or where we can be and what we can know. And then suddenly we're not choosing because we just feel under pressure and everything is happening to us instead. Both of them I feel are a control thing. Can I control the external by choice, or because of the external I feel it's happening to me, I feel like I've got no control.
And I think it's really interesting, because I think it's that whole, but in the moment, how do we hold on to that perspective? because what you just said, the two sides of a coin, really. And so how do we hold in the moment? How do we hold that? No answers on a postcard, potentially.
It just takes work, it takes work. It takes work in understanding. It takes awareness, I wrote a post this morning. I quoted a brilliant Viktor Frankl quote about, if you can't change the situation, you change yourself. That was no, I better give you the exact quote that I quoted from Viktor Frankl, which I now cannot remember off the top of my head. And it's brilliant. And obviously, Man's Search for Meaning is a fantastic book. But okay, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing: the last of human freedoms. Choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. To choose one's own way. And I think that's so powerful because it's telling us, despite what's happening, despite what's going on, you have a choice. And I've given talks, Laura, on well-being and on mindset, and I'll talk about a very simple coaching concept called CIA. Control, influence, accept. In every situation, and I'll highlight
sorry,
it's control.
Say that again, Mark.
CIA, control, influence, accept. So it's a simple diagram, and what happens to us in essence, Laura, is, particularly the examples we're talking about here, is your span of control is everything. You're trying to control all different things: what people think, how people respond, what people are saying, what's happening, all of this stuff that's outside of your span of control. Okay, and when you're in that space, you're not free because you're trying to control stuff that you cannot possibly control. Trying to control what other people say, it's not going to happen. Trying to control what other people say, you can't do that. Okay, so there's a part of it that's around acceptance or adaptation. Okay, and that can be hard. So acceptance can be hard because could be an emotional component to it, so you still have no choice but to adapt, right? It's about understanding where is my choice in this situation. And then when it comes to the middle part, is influence. Can I influence anything that's happened? Maybe we can, maybe we can't, right? But then it comes to the point of control. What is my control in the situation? And my control, we like to try and have it as an action, as something we can do. And I've talked about this as a mindset piece. And I have a pushback from people saying, yeah, but there's situations where you can't control, situations where you've nothing at all you can control. It's like, well, okay, well, what if you're, terminally ill? I was like, okay, well, that's a serious situation. But you're right, you can't control the fact that you've been diagnosed as being terminally ill. You can't control that. But you can still control your response to what's happened. You can still control your choice. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, and that's why I said the accept or adapt, because it's very hard to accept it. It doesn't mean you don't have to adapt it, because you can't, you can't change the reality. That's the reality that I have to deal with. And my control comes back to me, myself. What can I do? How do I control myself in a situation? So instead of being caught up by it and destroyed by it, I am free to be myself within it.
And I think that is what makes so much sense to me. It's like, and I say so often about, there are so many things, and why in this situation, I accept the word accept. In my world, in my narrative, I talk about acknowledgement, because I don't accept that certain things happened from a perspective of it justified all the narratives that I knew. So, husband die early, like all these other things. But I acknowledge that it happened. And in that acknowledgement, it gives me a sense of ability to choose what I do next. And I think that's, that's where I understand or have an empathy with what you're saying. And it's really interesting. I don't know, I'm probably jumping all over the place a little bit, because so many things just in the exchanges from your post and mine yesterday, because I went to a place of, I once heard this metaphor of a teaspoon of salt in a teacup of water. It's just putrid. So what do you do with that? Well, you can sit with it, but you have a choice. The choice is, Okay, well, what do you do with it? I can add more water, and at some point the teacup will get full, and then you have to find a different vessel. Now the salt is never going to disappear. So there's things in my life, for example, that will never disappear. They were beyond my control. They weren't my choice. They were things that happened, but I still have a choice about how I choose to see the situation and what I decide to do next. And so I don't know, it's slightly off, I don't know. But I was thinking about this earlier. We're having read your post and thinking, what did I want to bring to this conversation this evening? Because I think there are a lot of people who right now reckon they don't have any choices. They feel the choices are being defined for them. And I don't know, I think we can still take it forward. Anyway, that's a very deep and meaningful moment. So
But look, there is a truth to it in some ways. It's sometimes so, you're looking for a promotion at work. It's given to someone else. Okay, so that's out of your control. That's it's out of your control, and your choices have been defined for you. So therefore, you had a vision for where you wanted to go, and that's denied to you by what's happened. But that doesn't mean you can't change that. You can't go, well, then what do I do instead? How do I do something different? Like, I often remind there was a girl in one of my teams. She was a supervisor, and she was going for a job as an assistant manager, and she didn't get the job, and she'd been rejected for a couple of times in a row. And she was sitting with me, and she was just really angry and emotional. It's not right, it's not fair. And so, I was actually coaching her through it. Even though I wasn't a coach at the time, but obviously I was doing this from a management perspective. I was like, well, what's going on here, right? She was, I didn't get the job because they don't like me, because all of these kind of things. Well, hold on a second, what's the truth to that? What can we do about that? Because that's where we get into, we get into this kind of. It's easy to feel the world's against us. It's easy to kind of build that narrative for ourselves, because therefore it's not our responsibility. We lose agency. So my conversation with her about, okay, well, where is your responsibility? What can you do? How can you, get yourself so that they can't ignore you and can't you refuse it next time? So it was much more about, okay, well, we have to get the feedback. Why did you not get the job? What was the reasons the other people got the job above you? Okay, so then what can you do to close that gaps? And so suddenly, instead of feeling bad about not getting the opportunity, then it's much more about, well, how do I make sure I get the opportunity next time? How do I make sure that I push on? Or I had a conversation with a guy years ago when I was a supervisor in a team, and I was trying to get to be assistant manager. He was my mentor at the time, and he was the I think he was, I'm not sure what he was a CFO actually at the time. And I said to him, like, look, I was just telling him that my boss doesn't, I was saying I don't get on with my boss, and this person got picked out of the job. And he goes, well then, he says, okay, well, listen to what you're telling me, right? So if you can't see an opportunity there, then you have to leave. Then leave. Don't stay. What are you staying for? And I was like, why would someone who's one of the top guys in the company tell me, like, what do you mean leave? But he was absolutely right, because also, so my control wasn't walk away. My control was assess all the potential options. And if there is no option there for me to go, and I'm too angry with the place, well, then go and find yourself somewhere else where you can try it, instead of letting that feed you and build you, and then it become the narrative. I feel sorry for myself because I didn't get that chance.
And that's so true. It's like, what is it that we need to feed ourselves that's going to give us the chance? And we can get so consumed with the story that is negative rather than the story that says, okay, well, actually, in what I've just heard right now, X, Y, and Z could have happened rather than A, B, and C. I mean, maybe we'll switch them around, but I think that's the bit that I sit there going, this is where we start to not choose the right step next forward, is because we get lost in a narrative. Excuse me. And it's finding that narrative as to what matters most now. It's not necessarily in like 10 years time, because like frankly the world is moving so fast right now. and we can't predict a million threads. So what do we do right now that means and is meaningful for now, that allows us to choose right now and again.
Like, it's amazing how many instances in our life this kind of reality occurs. It's extraordinary. Let me use personal examples again. I would go to the gym a lot, I would train a lot, and I injured both arms, both elbows, about 10 months ago. They're only coming right now, right? But that meant that I was really pissed off. I can't train the way I want to train. I can't do this, right? That's a reality. So what options do I have? You can be frustrated, okay, but you can't let that dictate everything else. So you have to do something else and choose something else in the back of it. This is something that really strikes me, and maybe it's an age thing, where we are from a generation. Or like, there are a lot of clients I work with, male and female, and we'll be talking around, we'll be looking at personally and professionally what's going on in life, and we'll be talking around what's really going on. And I can see we might do some wheel of life work and look at a few different things, and I can see what's not being said. I can see that there's a relationship here that's not where it needs to be, and I know I can hear the language of, oh, well, they don't have time for me, and they don't, and they don't, and they don't, and they don't. Well, hold on a second. Well, what are you doing? What are you doing differently? How are you inputting? And
so true.
But often because the choice, people feel like at that situation they're only in one choice. It's walk away, or that, rather than the choice to do something about it that's in a positive way, to try and move and shift, to choice to even have a conversation. Something my wife said to me, right?
You're so right. It's that. It's like that is almost like extreme ends of the continuum, rather than going, okay, like we have a choice to have a conversation. I mean, like, novel.
I know,
but I think I think one of the things that I question deeply right now is, and this has come up in several opportunities. I'll call them opportunities. In more recent times, and one on Friday, which was billed to be a conversation, is that people have forgotten how to listen, what's really going on, and in that, at the moment that they've stopped truly listening, they've forgotten how to choose.
Oh yeah,
because they're not allowing others to do it, so therefore they're not allowing themselves to do it.
Yeah. Like the word to decide, right, which is what a decision is when you're choosing, you're deciding. The word to decide, and the Latin root of that word, means to cut away.
Yeah.
So if you're in a situation where you're bogged down in the stress of the situation, I'll give you another example, right, that I see so often, working with business owners. And business owners, Laura, running a business, nobody cares about your business like you do, right? Nobody cares. So this is my business. I put everything into it. So if you're running a business and you've got 5, 10, 15, 100 staff, right? And it's very frustrating that they don't care the way you care. It's very frustrating. But for them, it's a job. It's a job. It's like I do my job, and I will go home at the end of my day after I've done my job and done my hours that I'm contracted to do, and that's what I'm going to do, And there's a huge frustration in that, right? But we're then, as a business owner, we're letting that frustration get to us. We're letting that bog us down in terms of what we're doing. But, when we decide, and it's a hard decision, but you know what? Like, if they're doing their job the best that they can do, if they're not, can I coach them? Do I need to get rid of them? What do I need to do about it? Okay, great. But then I have to decide to accept that they are not going to care the way I do. And that's why the decision is, when you decide that, you've cut away all of that. You've cut it away because I've decided to accept that. It's gone. It doesn't matter anymore. Now it doesn't have to impact me. Now it doesn't have to affect me in the same way because I don't have to put my energy into that. And that's the freedom of choice, because you can choose to be, this doesn't matter. Like, I'll give you one small other example from a music perspective. It was a post on Instagram the other day, and someone put a post on, I don't know if you know, Eric Satie's June Olympiad #1, right? It's this beautiful, do you know it? Okay, well,
maybe.
listen to that. It's this beautiful, 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 very slow echoing piano music, right? And I had never heard it before. I had a Discman with me right at the time, so just to date myself at the time. And I had this classical music CD, and I put it on, and I was rushing to the train station. Like, it was about a 40-minute walk at the bus station from where I was living. And I sprinted to the bus station, and I sat down in the bus station, sweating, like panic, stress, like, oh God, Jesus Christ. And the thing was still playing. And then the next song came on. It was Eric Satie and piano, and it's so slow. It just slowed everything down. And it just reminded me of it. And I put a comment on saying, the first time I heard this, I watched the word. And so suddenly the whole world slowed down and everyone was still rushing around like lunatics. And I just realized, God, it's all so unnecessary. It's all
and
so
I could not agree more. I mean, I went swimming this afternoon, and I had my niece like going, blah, 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 was like coming to pick her up. The fact that she then 3 hours later said, I'm coming now. Having me rushed around stupidly. But I swam because, to the exact point that you're making, there is never enough noise, because it's always about someone else's noise as opposed to our noise. I don't know. You would make it sound far better and far more eloquent than that. But it's hearing our own voice in order to be able to make a choice that matters, I think, for me.
Yeah. Well, and isn't that it too? But it depends what voice we're playing, what narrative we're playing in our head, what record we're playing in our head at the time too, And when you said to me, okay, well, how do you just do this? That is the hard part, because it's a practice, like everything else. It's a practice. It's I think it's a good example, and I'm using lots of examples myself here, right? A good example is our kitchen table. Our kitchen table is mental a lot of the time, right? There's 3 people diagnosed with ADHD, and one undiagnosed, and we won't say who he is, right? And
no, we won't say who he is.
It can be just mental, And if you get caught up in it being mental, because it's like one person starts a conversation, the next person goes halfway through that conversation, goes off in this direction, and then another one comes in over here, and you get caught up in the mayhem of it. But sometimes if you take that decision, okay, whoa, this is just what's happening. And a little bit like the Eric Satie, you take a step back and you just can enjoy the madness for what it is, a little bit of madness. Like, even to the point in our modern world, like you said, it's so mad, it's so crazy. Like, you look at social media and it's like, I'm not saying to LinkedIn, but much more, you go to the Twitter spaces or some of these spaces, and even you log into LinkedIn, log into LinkedIn at 9 p.m. time, like it's a cesspool of just, you're right, you're wrong, political stuff now. Like, and I'm just like, what's the point? What's the value? How am I getting anything out of this? Like, and that's a choice. It's a choice to go, I'm just going to disengage from this and see how that makes me feel. But you have to work on it and go, that's not important to me right now. How's that going to help me? How's that going to move me forward? Or my favorite.
And that's it, isn't it? How is it going to move us forward? And I am very conscious of your time. But I am going to ask you, what are we going to do differently? What is the answer to all of this? I know. Maybe I should say answers on a postcard.
The answer is honesty, right? And it's being honest with ourselves. We have to start with go on.
And I agree with you. I do think it is. What point are we? I think some of all of this stuff out there is because we're trying to achieve something that is so beyond what we really are. Until we're honest about who we are, what matters to us, how we can truly connect, then we're going to be striving for something we are never, ever, ever going to achieve. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I would agree with you. Like, it's like anything, it starts with awareness, but it also starts with being honest. Because, like, one thing I say often when I'm doing talks around well-being and stuff, right? And I'll have a slide, and the slide says, you might not like, it's a slide that actually is written on top, good news. and says, you are doing this to yourself.
Mm.
But it's just because we actually are. Like, you're sitting there and you're stressed. And I know, right, work is busy, okay? And you're under a lot of pressure. I know that. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen, right? But you can't do every single thing at once. It just can't be done. You have to do stuff how you can do it, right? But the doing it to ourselves is because we pile it all on top of ourselves and can't function and can't cope with all this stuff, as opposed to choosing, going, okay, let's break this down. What can I do and how can I do it? And that's the choice. And that's where we're doing it to ourselves. But it needs a bit of honesty. Maybe I can't do this. Maybe I'm struggling. Maybe I need a bit of help in this. Maybe I need to be honest about I'm causing my stress, or I'm not doing the things that are good for me. Like, when you're under pressure, you don't go for walks. You don't do your meditation. You don't go for your swims that you might like. You don't listen to a bit of music, that you might like to listen to. You don't choose to do the thing that's good for you to avoid the thing that's bad for you. And there's a choice in that, a simple choice. So it's the practice choosing. And I mean to the point of, instead of, if you have to suddenly, my daughter spilt milk years ago as a kid, right? And she spilt the milk. And our natural reaction is to go, oh, for fuck's sake, because now I have to clean this up, and don't try and clean this up, and this is a whole mess. Instead, I went, oh my God, isn't that interesting the way it's flowing across the floor? And like, you could see her tense, ready for it to barrage. And then instead she was like, oh yeah, it is really interesting.
You got a different response from her. Or she got a different response from you.
She got a different response because of a choice I made, right? And what I mean by that, so if you have to clean up after dinner, you can clean up after dinner, for fuck's sake, or you can choose to clean up after dinner because you're doing it anyway. So choose to do it.
Exactly. And that is it. It's like, I think in that moment, in what you just shared there, Mark, is choosing is one thing, but consciously choosing is another thing. And I think what you're saying is like going, I'm consciously choosing what I am doing next, and that will make a difference. I think that's what I've heard from what you've just said, especially 100%. Because we can all choose in the moment and be like slightly, not necessarily doing things for the right reason, because like adrenaline, everything else, but it's a conscious choice about what we do next.
Yeah.
So anyway, conscious that you have, as ever, a strict schedule, so we will work out when we're catching on next. But lovely to see you, and I will carry on my fan treatment over here while I don't know, how warm is it over in Ireland?
About 20. Oh, right now probably down to about 16.
Oh, so not the 27 degrees. That,
it might be tomorrow, but like we'll
okay. Well, I think we're expecting about 37 on Thursday. Anyway, let's laugh. See you next month.